everyone, and welcome back to the show. Today we have a few things to talk about. First, the new 5G Wi-Fi that will be coming soon, and this is just absolutely terrifying stuff, guys. It's honestly a global epidemic, and we'll get more into that. But ultimately, if you haven't even heard of it, but the plan for 5G is to connect the human mind to artificial intelligence. So basically, nobody will be able to think beyond the system that already rules our lives. And everybody needs to be aware of the inescapable horror that comes before us. They want to monitor everything. Every movement will be tracked. Every thought will be collected. And obviously, that's clearly already happening through Facebook. They spy on you through your camera, microphone. You know, it's no secret already, but so does Google. Even through a hidden spy microphone that Google only just admitted that they forgot to tell users about. I mean, like, how surprising, you know, a hidden spy microphone that Google forget to tell users about. It's kind of like The Simpsons, you know, when the house is constantly watching them. And but we'll get more into that later. It's very crucial stuff, and I hope everyone takes this seriously. The stuff that we talk about, you know, take it seriously and always think freely. That's what's most important. So I'd like to introduce my next guest, former councillor Clint Uden. He's also got his Bachelor of Arts in History, and he was a member of a major political party for 10 years. Secretary for a local branch for 5 years. So Clint, I've known you for about a year now, and you used to be the former councillor for Wagga Wagga. You've most likely seen the candidates for the upcoming election. I think Joe McGirr will be running again, and McKenna Powell for the Nationalists. I've seen she's put a lot of money towards campaigning, and I've seen a few Dan Haynes billboards for the Labor. He'll probably give it another crack. What are your thoughts on the upcoming election for Wagga?
Well, first of all, thanks Nathan for having me on your show.
That's all good, man.
And that sterling introduction. In relation to the state election, which is coming up on the 26th of March, 2019, the New South Wales state election, the seat of Wagga Wagga, the incumbent is of course Dr. Joe McGirr, who stole the seat after 61 years. Well, didn't steal the seat, won the seat, I should say. Won it graciously and victoriously. At the last by-election.
A lot of help to Paul Fennell's preferences as well.
Indeed. And so, in getting back to, the Nats are spending a lot of money trying to, with their young female woman candidate, who I think she looks the part, but I don't think she's got the political, how should we say, the political aptitude to really be a proper and an effective representative for the people of Wagga Wagga. And so I think Dan Yeshua Labor is in there as well, but I think Joe will still win because at the last by-election we had Paul Fennell, who picked up about 10 to 12%, I think, of the vote, and so that vote will probably most likely flow to McGirr, who will just increase his margin on the seat, hopefully.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, but McKenna Powell definitely looks like she's just playing the part as usual. Most candidates.
I think so. I think Nathan, you're absolutely right there.
Yeah, well, hopefully it goes some way in that one direction good, as long as Labor doesn't get the majority seat. That shows a little bit of faith in the small town.
True.
But so you've heard of the yellow vest problems that have been apparently in Geneva. The yellow vest protested in front of the UN headquarters. So they're getting pretty closer and closer, right?
Right, I haven't heard this. this is an interesting development.
Yeah. So, I mean, they've already tried to. They've gone closer to the French Assembly Parliament as well. But we're currently on the 15th week. The French government isn't willing to, agree upon many terms. I mean, Macron definitely needs to go. And 13th week, if you saw that was a little bit more intense.
Yeah, wasn't someone seriously injured?
So basically, a number of protesters tried to storm the Assembly Parliament, and riot police fired a tear gas grenade, and one of the protesters caught it, and it exploded in their hands, so they lost 4 fingers. There's a video online about it.
It's grotesque. These fascists need to answer for their crimes.
One of the other protester leaders, he was one of the Yellow Vest actual online leaders. He was caught up with police, and he may lose an eye from the police attacks as well.
God, so there's been a lot of police brutality and a lot of hard-nosed response by this corrupt and ineffective government in France.
Yeah, so when it really shows when they're going towards that kind of direction of violence, shows they're not really willing to resort to a lot of kind of stuff. But I'll give one more example. There was a French police car driving through a crowd of protesters, and so the crowd of protesters, there was about 100 to 200 of them. The police were trying to drive to the rest of the police lineup, and all the protesters were throwing rocks and smashing sticks against the windshield and stuff, and the police inside the car were freaking out. But it really just paints the question, like, what are these guys willing to go through? Like, they must be getting paid pretty highly. Why don't they just step down?
Well, I think the police in France, like the police in other parts of the Western world, don't actually get paid that much. I mean, like a senior constable here in New South Wales is probably only on about maybe 68,000 a year or something like that. They're not really on that amount of money, and then they've got their own bills to pay. They're feeling the pressure as well of inflation and debts and credit cards and etc. Everyone's feeling the economic strain and the stresses of what this global corrupt banking system is doing to the ordinary person, the ordinary worker. And I think it's only a matter of time before the French police go, you know what, I'm going to put on a yellow vest.
Yeah, well, there was a blue vest movement. There's a fair few police officers, but yeah.
Yeah. So I think that could be a possibility, and a welcomed one at that.
Yes, hopefully, definitely agree. They're not willing to stop anytime soon, by the looks of it. So yeah. But I wanted to get back into that 5G thing. I know you don't have too much. You haven't researched that too much.
No, I haven't. I've just read just a tiny amount about it, and apparently it could have some negative implications.
Yeah, absolutely horrifying stuff. I like to compare it with the China's new social credit system that they want to use by 2020, where every citizen will have a social credit score that goes up or down based on their personal behaviour, and low-ranked citizens will be punished from taking buses or trains, for an example, just by having a low social credit score. So when you compare that to the, even like filling up a car with petrol, will be restricted. And of course, criticizing the government is a crime, and with this overwhelming influence creeping in, like, it's not so much different from the 5G, and which is coming too. But, they basically call the 5G is a military grade technology. So this stuff can change people's emotions and put voices and visions in their heads. This gives them the ability to track people in free time And this is the stuff tested in wars, so they know how it works. And the radiation waves from antennas that will ultimately affect and poison livestock and vegetables. So we're going into the futuristic system, the Orwellian nightmare, basically, where everything will be digital, all information will be digital, and they're open about this. They brag about this. If you looked at the World Economic Forum, which is I think it was 2018 or 2019, the latest World Economic Forum meeting, they discuss globalization, globalized economy, artificial intelligence, technology that can read people's minds. They discuss this openly, trying to push this Orwellian nightmare. It's scary stuff, and yeah. What's your take on that?
On the 5G network? Well, to be, naive and overly optimistic, I'm hoping that 5G is just an incredibly fast Wi-Fi internet system, and it doesn't have all of these disastrous effects. But I'm afraid I'm a bit more cynical and a bit more jaded and a bit more conspiratorial about these matters. I mean, there's already mountains of evidence about sound weapons and how sound can be used to manipulate large crowds and turn them nauseous or make them feel sick or give them some case of diarrhea or something like that. I've heard cases where they just disperse from the crowd. The crowd is always something every ruler has feared, and so I think this could be another weapon in their arsenal in the globalists agenda for these sorts of things.
It's definitely not a program I want to give to my children.
Yeah, there seems to be a bit of an effort by certain groups in the globalists, amongst the globalists, certain groups in the globalists that have a real gripe with nature.
Yeah.
And with the grand creator or creators of this planet. Yeah. And I think of Earth, and they like to pretend that they can manipulate the weather or nature or the environment to almost as a FU to God or the gods. And if what you say is correct about 5G and its effects on not only the human mind but the environment and our capacity to produce, or maintain clean water and food production, this has far-reaching and devastating consequences. And I think if you're a citizen, you should exercise your civics and find out about this sort of stuff and lobby your local representatives and ask them questions about it and try to get some answers.
Yeah, it's like one of those futuristic movies when there's a futuristic movie I saw as an example where the vampires kind of take over and then human blood becomes an important resource for everyone. It's kind of like that. If they pollute all the food through this high radiation kind of poison, then ultimately people will be dependent on whatever the government gives.
Yeah, indeed. Indeed, it's problem, reaction, solution.
Yeah.
Where the government creates a problem, or like I shouldn't say the government. More accurately, you'd have to say the fascists, and I want to give the proper definition here of fascism is by the man who invented fascism, Mussolini in Italy. In the early 20s, I think 1923, coined his definition of fascism. The Italian fascist was the merger of state and corporate power. And the state can't do these things alone, and the corporate can't do this alone. But when they merge, they become this what Mussolini called fascists. And that's what everyone needs to worry about is the fascists. And we should be doing our best to be active citizens and research and learn as much about these sorts of things like the 5G network as possible before we allow its implementation.
Yeah. Or just getting rid of the phone in general, eh? That's another one.
Oh, definitely. I mean, like I watched this this interview a few years ago. It was like just late line business on the Australians Broadcasting Communism Network, the ABC.
Yeah.
And and it was they're interviewing this English, City of London economist, banker, globalist fuckwit, who basically gave advice to, what should we do about if this, and his advice was buy this economist in London, in the City of London. His advice was buy yourself a small farm and a shotgun.
Yeah.
This was his advice to the average person, or out there, is to buy yourself a small farm and a shotgun. And I think it's absolutely correct. I mean, if you find yourself a few acres somewhere in regional Australia and rural Australia,
It was formed by Nazis. So all NASA information, it was basically one of Hitler's right-hand man, directed the 6 moon missions. And when he died, he told his assistant, the fake alien invasion is coming. So, but the fake alien invasion is basically a scare tactic to scare everyone into a one world government. Then also the documentary that I watched says that all space footage and documentaries are fake, distance from planets and stuff like that. Now, as absurd as conspiracies, as absurd as these conspiracies can get, I just wanted to bring light to this topic and get your opinion. Roswell being a diversion, and just all that kind of over the top conspiracies. What do you think about the whole space is fake kind of thing?
Well, Nathan, I'm open to. I have an open mind. Like the mind works like a parachute. You've got to keep it open. However, I like clocks. One of my things. I like old clocks, and some of the oldest clocks made in France in like the 1770s and stuff. And there's one that's a planetary clock, and it shows all the planets revolving around the sun and their relative distances, etc. And then you go back to Galileo, and then there's been so much established scientifically about, yes, the planet is round, it's not flat, but maybe it is flat. There's a lot of good arguments for flat. It's flat. But also, I think maybe this is just being brought up as a diversionary tactic of sophisticated propaganda to not only divide thinkers and people who are actually active in the conspiracy landscape, and just to distract them. And then, as for like the rest, like the Hitler thing, and that there could be a possible UFO invasion in Roswell and things like that. I think it's certainly maybe in ancient texts and mythologies and various things that there are arguments for such things as giants and there's been skeletal remains found of giants and the pyramids, and maybe they were Bigfoot, and maybe they were they all had their their place in time. But I I don't know if space is rigged, so to speak, or fake, or whatever. I'm very skeptical.
Nazi collusion.
All Nazi collusion. Getting back to the Nazi
Operation Paperclip.
Well, yeah, Operation Paperclip was most interesting. I mean, like, it was pretty much the USSR and America at the end of the Second World War divided the German physicists and scientists and took them back to their respective countries. But they were actually allowed to continue their work that they were working on for the Germans. And some of these projects, for instance, not many listeners will know this, that the most secret Nazi project wasn't to do with nuclear weapons at all. It was called the SS Bell project, and it was possibly a weapon. Well, it was a weapon, but it was also much more other things. And if people are interested in that sort of stuff, you can always read Dr. Joseph P. Farrell. He's written a book called SS Project of the Black Bell, I think it's called, and by Dr. Joseph P. Farrell. And there's another great book called Rise of the Fourth Reich by Jim Marrs, who only passed away a couple of years ago. It was a great tragedy that he's no longer with us and contributing. But what authors and historians and scholars like Dr. Joseph P. Farrell and Jim Marrs discuss is that possibly Roswell was actually Nazi technology. It was a Nazi flying saucer that was refined in Argentina and then flown into America just as pretty much like a shot across the bow to the Americans. Hey, look what we've got. That our physics was at least 15 years more advanced, in some cases 40 years more advanced than you have in the English-speaking West. And basically just rubbing their noses.
Yeah, that's why this conspiracy, I think, leans towards Hitler invention, the alien invasion upcoming.
Well, yeah, I mean, like, if you look at the technology that the Nazis had, if you read, like I said, Dr. Joseph P. Farrell and his books on it, and Jim Marrs to a lesser extent, but you go into it, and it's just mind blowing. Like, you're talking about anti-gravity physics, you're talking about disintegration weapons, were all discovered after the war in 1945, right? And so, like, for Roswell in 1947 to have a Nazi flying saucer crash over their country, which was smuggled out through U-boats at the end of the war to Argentina, refined in Argentina with the loot of Europe, mind you. Money is no option. Budget the size of, in the trillions back then. They had enough technology to actually form a breakaway civilization, some argue, where they're not dependent on fire. This was the main thing, I think. This was like the sacrifice of World War II, to a degree, was that everything we have today, in terms of energy, still really comes down to fire. You have to burn something. It's still fucking primitive. It's still like lighting a fire to get energy, to melt steel, to burn coal. I mean, we have nuclear, but beyond nuclear, some sort of propulsion which doesn't involve jet fuel.
Like water or something.
Indeed.
Apparently the old conspiracy about the guys that could make cars run on water or something.
Yeah, of course. I mean, those electric cars. I mean, Porsche's first car was electric.
Yeah.
Burning it, yeah.
Run on electricity. But, there's a lot of stuff I encourage the viewers to research on, whether it's 5G and the upcoming threat that holds, or if anyone's interested in this space is fake conspiracy, I urge everybody to research that. It's just an Eddie Bravo video on YouTube. But so next time, guys, we appreciate you all being here, and next video we'll touch down on all the subjects that you won't hear anywhere else. Clint, yeah, it was a pleasure having you on here. Any last words you'd like to share?
Indeed, thanks for having me on, I'll say first of all, and I'd like to encourage everyone that democracy and your right to vote is not a birthright, it's a skill, and to really become as informed as you possibly can in the time that you have to exercise a skilled vote.
Yeah, very wise words, Clint. Thanks everyone that tuned in. We will be back very soon for another show. This is Nathan Mottee, and let's bring back the fighting spirit and take back our country. Thank you all for listening.